So slightly quieter today than we were last week. I don't know if it's the heat keeping everybody away. I thought today I'd do a little bit on pastels. So there was a request that I did something on pastels, so I'll do that. So last week was watercolours and more particularly trees. So that's one of the demos I did last week. I was thinking maybe do perhaps something a little bit beachy. So this is our last week of July. So next month is a new month and a new project. And the things I seem to have down for kind of August come early September are London and the Thames and night scenes. So we could either do them both or one or the other. I don't know if anyone has any preferences. Anything? No? Or yeah, I quite like night scenes. Yeah, I've done a lot of London on the Thames lately. Quite fancy night scenes. So we'll go for night scenes then, if you're interested in that. I feel like it's slightly different because you've done a bit more, that might be good. On the London and the Thames theme, in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to have my work in the Wapping Group show. So I'll have at least 6 pictures up, and then we have a couple of reserves. So if any sale, we'll swap a few over.
Is it online?
It is. Sorry.
Is it online? The ones you put on?
It isn't. No, not yet. But I can do. I could sort of send out an email with the stuff I've got.
Nice to see what you put in.
And where is the exhibition then?
So it's in Chelsea, Kings Road. So if you fancy the trip up there, I think last year Tom came up last year, and 1 or 2 people came to visit the show. That's the show details. The actual private view is on the Tuesday that I'm not here, so that's why I'm not here that day. But you're welcome to come to that or come up to the show at any time. It's like a bit of a changing show because as things sell, you tend to put different ones in, so you get probably the best picture of the show early on than you would later on. But anyway, there's leaflets and things like that if you want to come to that in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, I'll do a little bit on this. So last week I did a little bit on watercolours, and you could actually put a bit of pastel on top of the watercolour if you wanted. So with this one that I did of trees, if you wanted to make some slight alterations, it can be a way of adding maybe some other textures, just giving it a slightly different feel. So I think it can be quite a nice addition to the watercolour, so turning it into more of a mixed medium. And the other thing is, with watercolours, they go wrong so easily and so quickly. So if you want to turn it into more of a mixed medium image, don't worry about it being a watercolour, pure watercolour, just add some other things like pastels, acrylics, whatever you want to do. So that I thought I'd just pop that out there as an option. So that was watercolour and watercolour paper. I'm just going to use a little bit of cartridge paper today. And to be honest, it actually works quite nice on, maybe I'll do some of the sketchbook, I don't mind about it because it's tiny paper. I quite like a bit of pastel in tiny paper, so I'll just put the sketchbook up here and do a little bit. The nice thing about that is you've then got a mid-tone already, and I do a lot of work outside, and it's much easier working on this sort of tone or on bright white paper that blinds me really. And I was thinking perhaps carry on with this. This was a photograph of the painting I did at the time, and that's the photograph I took at the same time. So I did that. That took me about 4 or 5 hours, kind of working on the side. The painting sold ages ago, so I can't show the actual painting. But I just thought it might be a basis, maybe just do a little bit of a figure or two and a beach scene. I've not really done anything particularly on figures yet at the beach, so I was thinking perhaps you take one of these figures out here and perhaps plant them on a beach. So with pastels, I quite like to have a couple of these pastel pencils. So these are, you can obviously get a whole set, which is really nice. And that works really nicely if you're working like Wayne works, quite a lot of detail and quite small, that works fantastically. If you like to work a bit bigger, I find a combination of maybe a couple of pencils and some of the chalks So these are really literally like the sort of chalk, nice sort of dry medium. So having these, I can just kind of sketch out. I was thinking I've just got this little girl here. I'll just draw around her hat so we can see it. It's getting a bit lost again in the background. I tend to just work top down, and the nice thing about this, actually this paper is quite nice pastel because it's not too textured, but it has got a nice tone. So I have done a couple of these, couple of pastels in one of the older sketchbooks I've got. This is one I've got last time from CY. So kind of sketch, work my way down. And with figures I find top down works best. Try and imagine where the middle of like their back, if they're closed, try and imagine where the middle of like their spine might be. So I'm thinking her spine would be perhaps somewhere here. I've got a head there that might be a bit wide. Her arm, just checking where that is, that's coming in about there. And across to there. These, I tend to just sharpen them with a knife, and then you could just sand them down a little bit to get a sharper point. They're a little bit brittle, so pencil sharpness. So you can get a special pencil sharpener for pastels that doesn't break them quite as easily as just an ordinary pencil sharpener would do. I'm thinking that's about right for her length. And then if you're drawing figures, just check where, like dropping a plumb line, like a vertical from the head down, you find that that roughly lines up in this case with, if I'm just trying to see where her feet are in relation to her head, there's a little bit of space just there. And same on this side. So I think that's going to be alright, something like that. And once there, I can then start getting some colours in the background. I'm going to go for a mixture of this and this. So some sort of sandy colours. I tend to go a little bit darker first. And these, the first tones you could just work them into the pastel paper if you wanted. This is a fairly smooth paper, so it's going on quite nicely. I probably wouldn't be able to layer loads of pastel on this though, because it's a fairly smooth paper. So that could be the first tone. And then the second pass, I tend to just pop that over the top. I don't always overblend that. And that can come down a bit further actually to bring that in here. Background, I'm just going to imagine it's sort of beach huts and fir trees or something like that. And then the figure herself, her hat, she's in pretty much in shadow, so she's really dark. So I've seen a lot of students go in with really pale, pale tones like this or this. And in this case, it needs to be really quite dark, quite greyed down. So I'll probably go in, perhaps going with some brown or something to start with in here, just to get the darker tones. So it's a little bit more difficult to control than the pencils, but if you've got a pencil as well, you could interchange them. Her hat is in quite a bit of shadow, so it's got a little bit dark on the paper, but it's also catching some highlights in places too. So I go with a bit of pale yellow and then a bit of white over the top. Hopefully give the impression a little bit of sun catching top of the hat. In there, and then obviously her dress is a bluey tone. Again, a little bit of maybe a little bit dark at the start, almost like as a base tone. And I'll go in with this blue. So I kind of approach pastels much in the same way I would oil paint. So I tend to go darker tones and colours in first, and then I might line up a little bit. So dress can be something like that. But there may be some slightly lighter, you know, a little bit of reflected light. And once you've got the dark in those paler bits will pop out a little bit easier. Some bits of reflected light in there. And then to work in some skin tones, actually go a little bit lighter then. So adding a brown. And that, to me, is then getting a little bit closer to the colours and tones that I've got there. And this part of her forearm is in quite a bit of shadow, so that can go very dark. So that, and same with this arm, a little bit of strong shadow down that side. So it's fairly loose, fairly sketchy. And it could be that there's then a little bit of reflected light, maybe here, a bit of highlight, that's got a bit of light in that. Once I've got some darks down, I can then add some lighter pinky tones, things like that, and make that a bit more naturalistic. One thing I do find quite a challenge with pastels is that, you know, I can get something that looks like a skin tone, but it won't be quite as naturalistic as the colours there. They're much harder to get naturalistic colours with, so a certain amount of stylisation might be called for. Or you'll need a really wide range of pastels to get natural colours. But I think sort of as long as you've got light working, that will read quite nicely. And once you know, if I kept going with that, worked out a little bit. We're going to be looking at this as the art image rather than the photograph it came from. I would hope that would work. So yeah, that would be my advice with pastels. They're a nice medium, obviously very messy. You can spray them, but the trouble then is it darkens them. So sometimes it might be better to do the spraying before you put all the highlights on. And then just leave it. But to be honest, I just don't. I tend to just, if it's a proper pastel that's finished, frame it behind glass, or have a separate piece of paper that you just hinge here with a bit of tape and just fold it over. Or it can be like tissue paper, greaseproof paper, or just ordinary paper. And what you need to avoid is that happening to anything rubbing against the surface. So if you've got something just placed loosely over, you're going to generally protect the surface. And then just draw them flat and draw them there. Okay. Yes.